Part 1. Doctor sat alone in their observation chamber, surrounded by floating screens of light. Each screen showed reports from the Galactic Science Consortium, and each report told the same tired story. Progress had slowed. Discoveries that once came every few cycles now took centuries. The great species of the galaxy had stopped moving forward. Was a methodical, one of the oldest species in known space. Their people had been studying the universe for longer than most civilizations had existed. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched younger species crawl out of their birth worlds and reach for the stars. And they had helped build the Consortium, the great organization that was supposed to unite all scientific minds across the galaxy. But something had gone wrong. The Consortium had started with noble goals: share knowledge, work together, solve the great mysteries of existence. But over 12,000 cycles, those goals had been forgotten. Now the Consortium was just another political arena where species fought for advantage. Every discovery was classified. Every breakthrough was hoarded. Every piece of new knowledge became a weapon to be used against rivals. Closed their 4 eyes and let out a long breath. They remembered when things had been different, when scientists from different worlds had actually talked to each other, when a discovery on one planet meant celebration on 100 others. Those days were gone now. A soft chime interrupted their thoughts. A message was coming through the official channels, waved one of their long arms and opened it. The message was short. A new species had requested membership in the Consortium. They called themselves humans. Pulled up everything the Consortium knew about humans. It was not much. They came from a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel about a century ago. By Consortium standards, they were barely more than children. The methodical assembly, the ruling council of people, had already made a decision. The humans would be granted provisional membership. It was a common arrangement for new species. Let them join, let them learn the rules, and eventually they would become just like everyone else. Did not think much about it at the time. New species joined the Consortium every few centuries. They always followed the same pattern. At first they were eager and open. Then they learned how things really worked. Then they became just as secretive and suspicious as everyone else. The humans would be no different. 3 months later, learned how wrong they had been. The news came during a routine Consortium session. Was reviewing budget reports when the chamber suddenly erupted in confusion. Delegates from a dozen species were shouting at once. Some were angry. Others were frightened. A few seemed to be laughing, though it was hard to tell with some species. Grabbed the nearest colleague, a young with bright orange scales. What has happened? The eyes were wide. The humans, they have uploaded their entire scientific database to the public network. Did not understand at first. What do you mean, their entire database? Everything, they said. All of it, every research paper, every experiment, every discovery they have ever made. It is all there, freely accessible to anyone who wants it. Stood very still for a long moment. This had to be a mistake. No species would do something so foolish. Knowledge was power. Everyone knew that. Giving away your discoveries was the same as giving away your future. But when checked the public network, it was all there. Thousands upon thousands of human research files organized into neat categories: physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, engineering, mathematics, even their art and history and philosophy. The humans had hidden nothing. The Consortium did not know how to react. Some delegates accused the humans of lying. Surely this was not their real research. Surely they had kept the important discoveries hidden and only released worthless scraps. Others warned that this was some kind of trap. The humans must be trying to trick other species into revealing their own secrets. A few delegates, mostly from younger species, suggested that maybe the humans were simply being generous. This idea was quickly dismissed. Generosity on such a scale made no sense. There had to be an ulterior motive. The methodical assembly called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation, was summoned to attend. "We need to understand what the humans are really doing," the assembly chief said. "This behavior is completely outside our models. Either they are extremely clever or extremely stupid, and we need to know which." Was given a mission. They would travel to the human, study their research institutions, and discover the truth. Were the humans hiding something? Were they planning some kind of elaborate deception? Or were they really as foolish as they appeared? The journey to Earth took several weeks. Spent the time reading through human scientific papers, trying to understand how they thought. The papers were strange. They were written in a style that seemed almost deliberately simple, as if the authors wanted anyone to be able to understand them. Many papers ended with sections called future directions, where the researchers openly admitted what they did not know and suggested questions for others to explore. This was bizarre. In consortium science, admitting ignorance was weakness. You never told others what you did not know. That would only help your rivals. When arrived on Earth, they were met by a human scientist named Dr. Sarah. She was small by consortium standards, with dark hair and quick eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She smiled when she saw, showing her teeth in the human expression of friendliness. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We are so excited to have you here. I hope we can show you how we do things." Over the following days, Doctor took on a tour of human research facilities. What saw there challenged everything they thought they understood about science. In one laboratory, researchers were working on a new type of energy storage. Their work was difficult, and they had failed many times. But instead of hiding their failures, they had published them. Every dead end, every mistake, every wrong turn was documented and shared with the world. "Why would you do this?" asked. "Your rivals can see exactly what does not work. They can skip ahead past all your failures." Doctor looked confused by the question. "That is exactly the point. If someone else can avoid our mistakes, they might find the solution faster, and then we can all benefit from it. But you will not get credit for the discovery." "Credit is nice," Doctor admitted, "but getting the answer is more important than getting credit. Besides, if we help others, they help us too. It works out in the end." Did not know what to say. This was completely alien to how the consortium operated. In the consortium, you guarded your failures even more closely than your successes. Failures were evidence of wasted resources. They were embarrassing. They were certainly not something you shared with the galaxy. But as watched the humans work, they began to see a strange logic in it. Because the humans shared everything, they never duplicated each other's efforts. When one laboratory hit a dead end, others knew not to waste time on the same path. When someone made a small discovery, dozens of others immediately built upon it. The result was a kind of scientific momentum that had never seen before. Ideas moved through human society like waves, growing larger and faster as they spread. A breakthrough in one country sparked innovations in 10 others. Problems that should have taken decades to solve were conquered in years. Stayed on Earth for 6 months, studying and observing. By the end, they were no longer certain what to tell the assembly. The humans were not hiding anything. They were not planning any tricks. They genuinely believed that sharing knowledge freely was the best way to make progress. It was the most radical idea had encountered in their long life, and they were beginning to wonder if the humans might actually be right. Part 2. Returned to the consortium with a report that pleased no one. The methodical assembly had expected to hear about human deception, about hidden agendas and secret weapons. Instead, told them the truth. The humans really were sharing everything, and they were doing it because they believed it would help everyone, including themselves. The assembly did not know what to make of this. "They must be lying," said one elder. "No species survives by giving away its advantages." "Perhaps they are simply too young to understand," suggested another. "They will learn eventually." but had seen too much to accept these easy explanations. They had watched human science in action. They had seen how fast ideas moved when they were not locked behind walls of secrecy. The humans were not naive. They had simply found a different way to do things. Still, the assembly decided to take no action. The humans were a minor species. Their open approach was interesting but surely not sustainable. Eventually, they would learn how the galaxy really worked, and they would start hoarding their knowledge like everyone else. Until then, there was no need to worry about them. Was not so sure. They returned to their observation chamber and continued watching the human networks. What they saw over the following months changed everything. The first sign came from the Warren species, ancient and proud, but they had been suffering from a terrible plague for generations. Their best scientists had worked on the problem for centuries without success. The disease attacked their genetic code in ways that seemed impossible to treat. A young researcher named had heard about the human database. Out of desperation, she began reading through human genetic research. Most of it was useless to her species. Human and biology had almost nothing in common, but the techniques the humans used to study genes were remarkable. The humans had developed something they called CRISPR, a method for editing genetic code with incredible precision. They had shared not just the theory but the practical details. How to build the tools, how to use them, what mistakes to avoid. Realized that she could adapt these techniques for biology. It took her 2 years of work. She published her progress openly on the human networks, just as the humans did. Other scientists saw her work and began helping. Human researchers offered suggestions. A biochemist contributed an insight that saved months of effort. In the end, found a cure. The plague that had killed millions for generations could finally be stopped. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. A problem that had seemed unsolvable had been solved, not by secrecy and competition, but by openness and cooperation. And it had been solved using human techniques, freely shared with anyone who wanted them. The consortium's reaction was complicated. Many delegates were genuinely happy for others were disturbed by what this meant. If they could benefit so dramatically from human openness, what else might be possible? More stories began to emerge. An engineering collective had been struggling with a problem in starship design. Their hull materials kept failing under certain types of radiation. They had worked on the issue for 50 years without progress. One of the younger engineers had started reading human materials science papers. She found that humans had encountered similar problems decades ago, when they were first building ships to explore their own solar system. They had solved it using a special alloy that absorbed radiation instead of letting it pass through. The human papers included everything: the composition of the alloy, the manufacturing process, the testing protocols. They adapted the design for their own ships, and the problem was solved in months. Quietly, scientists across the galaxy began using the human networks. At first, they just read. They downloaded papers, studied techniques, and applied what they learned. But some of them started to wonder, what if they shared their own work too? It was a frightening idea. Sharing knowledge went against everything they had been taught. It was dangerous. It was foolish. It would make them vulnerable. But the humans seemed to be doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Their science was advancing faster than anyone had predicted. Their economy was growing. Their people were thriving. Maybe the old ways were not the only ways. The first non-human scientists to publish on the human networks did so anonymously. They were too afraid of punishment from their own governments to use their real names. But their work was real, and it was valuable. Other scientists read it and built upon it. Slowly, the networks began to grow. Watched all of this with growing amazement. Something was happening that had not happened in thousands of years. The walls between species were starting to crack. Not everyone was happy about this. The old powers of the consortium saw the change as a threat. The methodical assembly called another emergency session, and this time their tone was much more serious. "The humans are corrupting our scientific institutions," the assembly chief declared. "They are spreading dangerous ideas about openness and cooperation. If this continues, our entire system of knowledge control will collapse." There were calls to expel humanity from the consortium. Some delegates wanted to go further. They suggested banning all contact with human networks, making it illegal for citizens to access human research. The debate went on for days, listened but did not speak. They were thinking about everything they had seen: the human networks, the cure, the ships, all the small discoveries that were happening every day as scientists from different species finally started talking to each other. On the final day of debate, the assembly called for a vote. The motion was simple: expel humanity from the consortium for violating established scientific protocols. The assembly chief called on each delegation to state their position. The methodical would vote yes. Everyone expected that. Several other old species would join them, but as the voting continued, something unexpected happened. The delegation voted no. Their speaker reminded the consortium of the plague cure. "The humans saved millions of our people," she said. "We will not forget that." The voted no. "Human knowledge has already become part of our engineering," their delegate explained. "Cutting ourselves off now would set us back generations." One by one, species that the old powers had expected to support them voted against the motion. Young species who had benefited from human openness. Middle powers who saw opportunity in the new way of doing things. Even some old species who had grown tired of the slow pace of consortium science. When the final count was taken, the motion had failed. Humanity would remain in the consortium. The assembly chief was furious. "This is a mistake," they declared. "You will all regret this." But was not so sure. As they watched the delegates file out of the chamber, they saw something they had not seen in a very long time. Scientists from different species were talking to each other. Not arguing, not competing, just talking. Sharing ideas, making plans. The cascade had begun, and it could not be stopped. Over the following years became one of the strongest voices for change in the methodical assembly. It was not easy. Many of their colleagues thought they had been corrupted by human ideas. Some stopped speaking to them entirely, but kept pushing because they had seen what was possible. The human networks continued to grow. What had started as a small experiment in openness had become something much larger. Scientists from dozens of species were now sharing their work freely. Cross-species research teams were forming. Problems that had seemed impossible were being solved. The old powers tried to resist, but they were fighting against a tide that was too strong to stop. Every success story made more scientists curious about the new approach. Every breakthrough won more converts. The galaxy was changing, and there was nothing the old guard could do about it. Sometimes thought about their first meeting with Doctor, years ago on Earth. The human scientist had seemed so naive then, so innocent in her belief that sharing knowledge was simply the right thing to do. Now understood that she had not been naive at all. She had been wise in a way that the ancient species of the galaxy had forgotten. Knowledge shared was not knowledge lost. It was knowledge, and the humans had shown the galaxy what that really meant. Part 3. 20 cycles had passed since humanity joined the consortium, and the galaxy was almost unrecognizable. Stood before the Grand Assembly, looking out at delegates from over 200 species. Many of them had not even been spacefaring when the humans first arrived. Now they sat as equals among the oldest civilizations in known space, their representatives eager and bright-eyed, ready to contribute to discussions that would shape the future of countless worlds. The chamber itself had changed. The old design, with its separate sections for each species, had been replaced by a circular arrangement where delegates sat mixed together. It was a small thing, but it meant something. The walls between species were coming down everywhere, even in the architecture. Was old now, even by methodical standards. Their scales had faded to a pale gray, and their movements had slowed. But their mind was still sharp, and they had been chosen for a great honor, presenting the final report on what the consortium was now calling the human effect. The data was remarkable. Since humanity's integration into galactic society, the rate of major scientific discoveries had increased by 340%. Diseases that had plagued the galaxy had been cured. New propulsion systems had opened regions of space that had previously been unreachable. Agricultural innovations had ended food shortages on dozens of worlds. Medical advances had extended across multiple species. But knew that the numbers only told part of the story. The real change was harder to measure. It was in the way scientists talked to each other now. It was in the collaborations that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. It was in the young researchers who had grown up believing that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. Honored delegates began, their voice carrying across the silent chamber. When humanity first joined us, many expected them to learn our ways. We assumed that their openness was a weakness, a sign of youth and inexperience that would fade with time. We were wrong. A murmur passed through the assembly. Even now, some of the old guard bristled at such direct criticism of their earlier judgments, but was beyond caring about politics. They were here to tell the truth. The humans understood something that we had forgotten. They understood that the universe is too vast and too complex for any single species to comprehend alone. They understood that every discovery hidden is a discovery to those who might have built upon it. They understood that in the long run, we all benefit when knowledge flows freely. Touched a control, and a massive holographic display appeared above the assembly. It showed the universal science networks, the system that had grown from humanity's original open database. Lines of light connected thousands of research stations across the galaxy, showing the flow of information in real time. This network now serves as the primary repository for galactic knowledge, continued. Every day, millions of researchers access it. Every day, new discoveries are uploaded and shared. Every day, scientists from different species find ways to work together that would have been impossible under the old system. The display shifted to show specific examples. A joint human team that had developed a new treatment for genetic disorders. A methodical collaboration that had mapped previously unknown regions of subspace. A project involving researchers from 17 different species that had finally cracked the mystery of dark matter. These achievements were not possible under the old ways, said. When we hoarded our knowledge, we also limited our potential. We were all working on the same problems, making the same mistakes, hitting the same dead ends. We thought we were protecting ourselves, but we were only holding ourselves back. An elderly delegate from one of the old powers raised a manipulator appendage. Recognized them, a former ally who had opposed the changes at every step. You speak of benefits, the delegate said, but what of costs? Many species have lost the advantages they once held. The balance of power has shifted dramatically. Some would say that the chaos you have unleashed has been harmful, not helpful. Had expected this question. They had been answering it for 20 cycles. You are correct that things have changed, they replied. The old hierarchies have weakened. Species that once dominated certain fields of knowledge have had to share that dominance with others. For those who measured their worth by how much they could keep from others, this has indeed been a loss. They paused, letting the words settle. But I would ask you to consider what we have gained. When the plague was cured, did it matter that the cure came from human techniques? When the ships were saved, did it matter that the solution was borrowed from another species? When we finally understood dark matter, did it matter that the breakthrough came from a team that spoke 40 different languages? The old delegate had no answer to this. They settled back into their seat, silent. Continued. The humans taught us that knowledge is not a weapon to be wielded against others. It is a gift to be shared with everyone. They taught us that helping others does not make us weaker, it makes us all stronger. The display changed again, showing projections for the future. If current trends continued, the consortium would make more discoveries in the next century than it had made in the previous 10,000 years. Problems that had seemed permanently unsolvable were now within reach. The great mysteries of existence were finally starting to yield their secrets. Some of you may wonder why the humans chose this path, said. I have spent much time with humans, and I believe I understand them now. They are a young species, but they have known great suffering. They have seen what happens when groups compete instead of cooperating. They have learned through painful experience that hoarding resources leads to conflict, and conflict leads to destruction. The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate was listening. The humans looked at the galaxy and saw that we were making the same mistakes they had made. They saw ancient species, rich in knowledge, wasting their potential on pointless competition. They saw problems that could be solved in years taking centuries because no one would share what they knew, and they decided to show us a better way. Stepped away from the podium and walked slowly across the chamber floor. Their old bones ached, but they wanted to look directly at the delegates as they spoke their final words. Some have called the humans naive. Some have called them foolish. Some have called them dangerous. I have come to believe that they are none of these things. The humans are simply brave. They were brave enough to trust other species with their knowledge. They were brave enough to believe that openness would be rewarded. They were brave enough to show strength through generosity rather than through hoarding. They stopped in the center of the chamber, surrounded by delegates from every corner of the galaxy. 20 cycles ago, I was sent to study the humans because we thought they were doing something strange. We thought they must be hiding something, that no species could really be so open. What I discovered was that the humans were not strange at all. They were simply remembering something that we had forgotten. His voice grew softer, but in the silence of the chamber, every word was clear. The universe is vast beyond our understanding. Its mysteries are endless. No single mind, no single species, no single civilization can hope to comprehend it alone. The humans understood this. They understood that we are all in this together, all of us, every thinking being in the galaxy. And they understood that when we face the unknown, we are stronger when we face it as one. They turned slowly, looking at each section of the assembly in turn. This is the lesson that humanity has taught us. This is the gift they have given us. Not just their knowledge, but their way of thinking about knowledge. Not just their discoveries, but their willingness to share them. Not just their science, but their faith that science should serve everyone, not just the few. Made their way back to the podium. They were tired now, deeply tired, but they had one more thing to say. I began my career believing that knowledge was power, and that power should be guarded jealously. I am ending my career knowing that knowledge is light, and that light should be shared freely. This is what the humans have shown us. This is their greatest gift. They looked out at the assembly one last time. The universal science networks now carry more information than any single mind could process in 1,000,000 lifetimes. Every day, that knowledge grows. Every day, new discoveries are made. Every day, we move closer to understanding the universe that gave birth to us all. And every day, I am grateful that a small, young species from an unremarkable corner of the galaxy had the courage to show us the way. Bowed their head, the ancient methodical gesture of respect. Thank you, humanity. Thank you for reminding us what science is supposed to be. The chamber erupted in applause. Delegates rose from their seats, the first time such a thing had happened in the Grand Assembly in living memory. Species that had been enemies stood together, united in appreciation for what had been achieved. And somewhere in the crowd, a small human delegation smiled. They had never asked for thanks. They had never expected recognition. They had simply done what seemed right, sharing what they knew in the hope that it would help others. Looking at the galaxy they had helped to change, they knew that it had.